Hi everybody, this is Aaron Geldert here. I'll be demonstrating what the WOW plugin can do. It's a brand new plugin. It has spectral distortion and filter modulation in it. You can take a quick look here at what the GUI looks like. It's got a lot of controls on it, but it all kind of pieces together in a pretty logical way, so I'll go through that. The first stage is we have a band splitter. Here in the kind of the title of the GUI, you can see that there's 3 different cutoff frequencies that are splitting between our low mid, and high frequency bands. Each of these can be enabled or disabled if you want to solo anything. They also all have their own saturation controls to distort them, along with volume controls. There's also a bypass option, 4 different types of distortion, and a dry mix you can add in. So I'll start off by demonstrating just with an oscillator what the distortion types look like through just this block. So we don't need to listen to the tone per se right now. I'll give you music examples in a sec. But let's just take a look at the analyzer. On Creamy, which is our softest version of distortion, I'll just bring up this band because it's in this 300 Hertz is in this band. You can see it's bringing just in a couple of harmonics, really not messing around too much, so it's a very subtle form of distortion. Next is Krusty. This will bring in a good number more harmonics, give you a little more exciting tone. Next will be Crunchy, though. This has a wide range of harmonics to bring in, so that really brings in some character. Finally, Crispy. This one is totally overdriven. This is bringing in a huge set of harmonics, all the way up to the point where you can start to see the artifacts of aliasing coming back in. So this will really give you a super noisy, crunchy, distorted sound. I'll go back to give you an audio example here with a guitar sound. If we listen through Creamy, really subtle again. When you A/B it with a distortion bypass, you can see what's really going on, but it's very subtle. Krusty, good bit more energy going on there. Crunchy, there we go, that's some fuzz. Again, you can turn up and down any of these channels if you want. You can isolate them. Finally, let's listen to Crispy. So that's really overdriving it, as you can see. The next thing to talk about is that there's this comp gain button. It's on by default. What it's doing is it's adding an equation that will, it's using an algorithm that will automatically compensate for the increase in gain that distortion provides, as in there's a lot more energy going on after the signal's been distorted, so it'll sound much louder. This comp gain algorithm matches the volume as you turn up the distortion to turn down the output signal, so it'll sound at a similar level to the original input, even when things are totally slammed. So you can see before I turn that on, compared to the clean signal, it was just blowing it out of the water. But spectrally, they have a lot of different stuff going on, but they're at a very similar level compared to what would have happened without that button. So that's an interesting little contribution. Next, there's also this auto distortion algorithm. This uses an LFO to distort each band at a different phase from the other. So it's not just turning up and down all the distortions, it's kind of giving you a ripple of turning up and down each band synced to this rate of the LFO and the depth of what amount of distortion you want. So this gives you a kind of cool effect. You can see it makes it kind of sound a bit like a tremolo, but it's kind of funky because it's moving everything up and down per the band. Everything is out of phase with the other band's LFO. So that's about it for the distortion block. I'll head over and just bypass this whole thing so we can get into the filtering block. There's a couple of things to know about this block. First, there's a detector up top, which is sending in a signal to this other filter's options. You have the option of a LPF or low pass filter, a band pass or high pass, along with the option to bypass it all, mix in a dry signal, and then control a lot of the parameters of the filters down here. By default, if we take a listen to what a low pass filter will sound like, I'll use some brass music so that we can really hear what's going on. It's going to be following the envelope of the signal and tracking the overall volume and seeing when it crosses a threshold. When it crosses that threshold, it'll begin to modulate up from the cutoff frequency, moving it up further, and we'll hear kind of wow sound effect, hence the name wow filter. So let's take a listen to this example. Sensitivity affects how far it moves up and down, or how quickly it'll move further up and down. So another option is the coupled Q control here. You can control the Q right there, but you can also couple it to the frequency so that it's automatically louder, or higher Q, sorry, when you're at high frequencies, which is natural because it's harder to hear a high boost in the high frequencies compared to the low frequencies. So couple Q gives a very natural sounding effect. You can also have a parallel filter which will operate on its own. I'll switch over to bandpass here. I'll take a listen to that. I'm going to mix in a tiny bit of the dry signal as well so we can hear the full range sound, because the bandpass will be dropping the gain a lot. There's also a gain control here that I just turned up to help you hear more of the bandpass sound. But this parallel factor and parallel control lets you have two filters in parallel that are both modulating the same way, except that their frequencies are scaled up by a factor of 10. So if I have a default sound at a cutoff of about 400, this will have another filter in parallel at a 4K cutoff frequency. So we'll take a listen to that. So you can see it really gives you a flavorful effect. Finally, there's also a flip switch. You can have the frequency move down with modulation, or with up with modulation, which is the default. There's also a high pass option, of course, so I'll demonstrate those real quick here. So now you can see it's moving down from the max frequency to where the cutoff frequency is. And with high pass, let's take a listen to that as well. If I flip it, so that gives you a lot of modulation options, up or down, low pass, band pass, high pass, parallel or not. All that is very, very flexible for whatever you can imagine. Finally, there's also this LFO option where instead of tracking the envelope of the signal, we just have a random sample and hold that is giving you any amount of, at any rate, a kind of random cutoff frequency. So we'll take a listen to that. We'll say with band pass. pretty funky. We'll take a listen to a full range song, and why not? Let's add in a little distortion again. Take a listen to what things sound like as a whole. So that's about it. Have fun with this plugin. It's got a lot of fun options. Pretty neat. You can do it. You can do a lot of different things with it. There's a few interesting components that you can definitely spend a lot more time playing around with than I just did. For example, what happens as you feed this distortion into the filter modulation. So that's about it. Enjoy. If you have any more interesting questions about the details, this is a block diagram of what's going on. There's really a lot to pick apart in here, but you can see that there's 4 bands going on. Each of them has their own saturation controls, amp, enable, disable switches. All this information about what type of distortion is going on is being fed into them as well. There's this dry path along the side. Then the whole second stage, of course, uses either an envelope detector or sample and hold LFO, calculates the cutoff frequency based on that modulation source, and shows you in a cutoff meter. The parallel filter, of course, has to take in a cooked value for what its cutoff frequency will be. The filter type will be the same between them all. Again, this block diagram basically describes it all. It looks pretty complicated, but at the end of the day, it's a pretty neat plugin. So everything on the details will be on my website, and the files to download will be on my website as well. So enjoy.